He's making a list and checking it twice. He's gonna find out who's naughty or nice. Santa Claus is coming to town.
Hello good people, welcome to Folk Tales by Alma and Merry Christmas! Or Yule, or Midsummer Solstice, or whatever else you celebrate. It is a white, cozy, freezing Christmas. Just kidding. I think it's like 35 degrees. It's not climate change. Maybe it's also climate change. I live in the southern hemisphere. Here Christmas is held by the pool. Today we're gonna talk about one of the most prominent figures in our cultural imagination, and that's Santa Claus. We'll uncover the real-life sources of his legend, which involve cannibalism and grave robbing. A few interesting highlights of his convoluted evolution into the figure that we know today, and a couple interesting theories about scandalous pagan origins. By the end of the video, we'll talk about how we can take this figure and make it our own. But first, let's make my very first gingerbread house ever. I'm actually kind of nervous.
Okay, so I started by putting all the ingredients together and blending. I'm not used to cooking, so this was an experience. Yeah. Spices. Egg. I know you know it's an egg. Yeah. More blending. And kneading. Kneading is surprisingly therapeutic. This was my favorite part. This was less than my favorite part. How on earth do you do this? And yeah, putting the icing on was underwhelming and overwhelming at the same time. Holding. What about you? Just as I thought it would be. Stick! I gave in to my creative tendencies and stopped really caring what I was doing. Dot dot dot, line line line, and honestly, if you know how to actually decorate a gingerbread house, I wholeheartedly admire you. Curlicues all over the place. And some semblance of a heart. Here we go! Looking like a proper house for something. What do I think? That's some loud music is what I think. I don't love it, don't hate it. Looks like it was made by a child. I like that. It's an aesthetic. Would I make it again? Probably yes, but maybe in winter. Right now it is incredibly hot. Summertime. So yeah, I'm pretending.
What are the real-life origins of Santa Claus? The legend is based on a bishop who lived in the 4th century in what is now Turkey and was called Nicholas of Myra. We know very little about his actual life, basically know when he was born, when he died, and the fact that he was the bishop of Myra. But his legend has expanded gloriously. One of the first parts of his legend to emerge was that he came from a wealthy family, but he was all for redistribution of wealth. He couldn't stand to see people in the same city as him dealing with all the consequences that poverty brought at the time. Young women who didn't have means to get a dowry and get married would sometimes be forced to become sex workers against their will. This guy was already a priest, and he heard that a pious Christian man had, by the machinations of the devil, lost all his wealth. And he had 3 daughters, but he could no longer provide dowries for them. Nicholas went and, while the family was distracted one evening, tossed a bag of gold through the window. The father was overjoyed and arranged a marriage for his eldest daughter. After a while, he did the same thing again, went there, tossed the bag, ran off. The second daughter was married. Father was like, I have to know who's doing this. And then, of course, because he wasn't very original, he chose the same method to give the 3rd daughter her dowry. The father found him, thanked him, but Nicholas made him promise never to tell anyone what he had done. So how do we know? He snitched. Also, during his travels, he was known for calming storms at sea, saving prisoners from being executed at the very last moment. And once, upon arriving at an inn, he was told by God, I guess, that 3 orphans that had been traveling through had been murdered and pickled by the innkeeper. As any good saint would, he resurrected them. It's also possible the real Saint Nicholas attended the Council of Nicaea. And it is said that Nicholas thought that Jesus was God, and against the side that thought that Jesus was simply God's creation. The debate became incredibly heated. Saint Nicholas ended up punching another bishop in the face, became incarcerated as a result, and it turns out that while he was in prison, he was visited by Jesus and Mary, who asked him why he was there, and he said, "For loving you too much." And then they freed him, and the next morning they found him back in his bishop robes and patiently waiting for them. So it was declared that he was right. After he died, he started becoming this protector figure. He became the patron of seafarers and traders, a lot of other professions, because everyone liked him. And here comes the most interesting part of his story. Apparently his corpse was like miraculous and had some, how can I put this, grave juice. Some sort of fluid that flowed from the corpse, and it had like miraculous properties. So yeah, people just really like his corpse juice. Christmas toast. His body was being held in a grave where he was from. But in late antiquity and the early Middle Ages, saints were a big deal for tourism. If you wanted people to go to your city, you should have a famous saint's grave. And so the merchants of a town in southern Italy called Bari thought that it was unfair that these people over there had Nicholas's corpse when everyone liked him so much. So they decided to head over, grab the corpse, and head back. With at least part of Nicholas's remains, he kept producing that tasty corpse juice. But apparently they didn't take the whole corpse. Other parts of his body were claimed by Venice. Other parts were sold across Europe. Saint Nicholas' finger, Saint Nicholas' hair. How could you authenticate that it belonged to him? His worship extended into the Slavic territories and afterwards to Western Europe. His feast was celebrated on December the 6th, and in places like the Netherlands and England, the celebration really took off. In the Netherlands, in fact, it's still going strong. Today, instead of Saint Nicholas, he's called Santa Claus. He's still dressed as a bishop. He rides a flying white horse and lives the rest of the year in Spain. He's always accompanied by Zwarte Piet, supposed to represent either his servant or the devil himself. He has the role of punishing naughty children while Santa Claus rewards the good ones. In the Middle Ages and early modernity, he went from the role of protector to the role of disciplinarian. The whole naughty and nice list. In the Netherlands, children were made to memorize passages of the Bible, and on Saint Nicholas's day, he would ask them questions and they had to prove that they knew the scriptures. If they did, they would be given sweets and other token treats, but if they didn't, they would be condemned to hell. Yeah. I am jealous of people who are in wintertime right now. Unlike the Netherlands, we aren't celebrating a guy dressed as a bishop, we're celebrating Santa. So what's the evolution that led from one thing to the other? Part of this whole business was caused by Puritanism. So after Protestantism emerged and the Church of England was formed, in Great Britain there emerged a few movements like Baptists and Methodists that were, well, a bit extreme in their opposition to the Catholic Church. Everything that vaguely smacked of Popism, Christmas, saints, was seen as pretty sus, and it slowly fell out of favor. This, of course, included gift-giving of Saint Nicholas. The 1600s was a time of a widespread famine, deprivation, and war. These Christian movements were all about severity and abstaining from the pleasures of the world, working super hard. Everything that had become associated with Christmas, feasting, celebrating abundance, gift-giving, was also quite criticized. So at the same time that Saint Nicholas's celebration fell out of favor, there was this whole public debate about whether Christmas should be held at all. And it was the Puritans themselves that invented Father Christmas. It's a jolly old man dressed in green or blue that brings gifts on his back like a peddler and asks for food and ale and good cheer, who was afraid of being forgotten. And that's because at the time the whole celebration was being questioned. In a pamphlet, The Examination and Trial of Old Father Christmas, which was absolutely a real thing, he's presented as the beloved of wanton women, servants and students. And that's because he brought gifts and the women's husbands and lovers were forced to buy them, and because he brought free time to the working classes. This was thought of as a negative thing. The Puritans really went in for hustle culture. The celebration of St. Nicholas at the beginning of December was completely eradicated, and instead of St. Nicholas visiting and bringing gifts, it became more usual for the Christ child, represented by a small boy or girl dressed in white, to visit houses during Christmas Eve itself. But it turns out that this wasn't particularly exciting, so this Christ child started being accompanied with a figure like Father Christmas, or in other cultures, the Krampus. The whole celebration and gift giving leapt across the month of December, but ultimately it became less widespread. And this lasted several centuries, until the mid-19th century, with none other than Dickens and Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria, marrying into a German family, brought over a lot of the Christmassy traditions, like the Christmas tree, that hadn't lost favor in Germany. Because at the time, the families of the United Kingdom were seen as the backbone of the empire. Christmas became a child-centered holiday. And also in this era, Dickens published A Christmas Carol. And Dickens resurrected the figure of Old Father Christmas in his Ghost of Christmas Present, imbued with a spirit of human kindness. But he also took away from the religious aspect of the celebration, made it more of a feast of humanity and treating other people decently, spreading abundance and joy among all men. He goes from the original role of protector and that of the disciplinarian to that of mainly gift giver. The gifts were no longer for adults, they were for the children, the protagonists of this feast. The clothes of Father Christmas in England were mostly depicted as green, no flying reindeer, no sleigh, no North Pole or elves. Those aspects of the figure of Santa Claus developed in America, in those colonies of Dutch and German origins. One of these colonies was modern-day New York. It's here that Livingstone wrote the very famous poem The Night Before Christmas.
'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there.
It became really popular. If I say the first verse, you will probably tell me the second one. So it popularized some new aspects of the Santa Claus figure. Him coming on a sleigh pulled by reindeer, flying, coming down the chimney, people leaving food and drink out for him. In this poem, Santa Claus is a sort of tiny elf. He started being depicted in the press, and here
The name was shortened from St. Nicholas to Santa Claus.
in the work of illustrator Nast, the whole image consolidates as we know it today. Santa dressed in red, with his red cap, his reindeer bringing presents down the chimney. He's not tiny, he's a full-grown old man. And these illustrations became so famous, the image spread to Europe. There are some people that say that Santa Claus was invented by Coca-Cola. That couldn't be further from the truth. What Coca-Cola did, however, was adopt Santa's figure, which was conveniently now dressed in red and white, and they hired a commercial illustrator to design a yearly advertisement depicting Santa with Coca-Cola, and also associate the brand with cheer and family celebrations and all these good things. And it was through this slow adoption by advertisements, people dressed as Santa in department stores around Christmas, and thanks to his already existing gift-giving nature, that Santa became associated with consumerism. But I really don't think that's the whole story. What about the pagan origins of Santa Claus? There are some theories that say that Santa Claus derives at least in part from the Norse god Odin. Why is that? First, appearance. They're both hooded old men with long beards. They both go around traveling, flying even, while Santa does it on his sleigh, Odin does it on his magic horse. And they both also come during the winter solstice. It is said that in the coldest days of the year, when the sun would barely rise above the horizon, the veil between our world and the world of the dead was thin. At this time, Odin and his host of spirits and dead men would ride around the world, and this was called the Wild Hunt. If you met them, beware. Also, Odin would sometimes grant gifts, but also beware of his gifts. They were dangerous stuff. Another pagan theory is that of him as an Amanita shaman. Amanita is this toadstool mushroom. It is hallucinogenic, and it was used by Siberian shamans in their ecstatic practices to gain access to the world of the spirits. You see the mushrooms above ground, right? But the real mushroom business goes on underneath, the mycelium, an interwoven net of filaments that connects one mushroom with another and takes nutrients from the soil and distributes them among all the mushrooms. Why is Santa associated with the Amanita? Basically, the colors, the flying. Apparently, reindeer have been known to eat these mushrooms and get high, which is kinda terrifying. Even if they didn't directly inspire the birth of Santa Claus, they are still present in our cultural imagination, and they influenced how Santa was characterized. But it also prompts the question. What can Santa mean to us today? Some ideas rooted in tradition, but could still be fun little ways of changing Santa a little bit. Could be expanding the idea of Santa as redistributing wealth, what the legendary Nicholas of Myra did, enhancing our communion, our relationship to other beings, human, non-human, and the spirit world. Inspired in the Amanita and mycelium bed, redistribute our abundance to our neighbors, our family, our friends. And abundance doesn't have to mean expensive gifts. It could mean taking a meal to a relative, loving on your partner or your pet, or giving a friend a token gift to let them know that you're there for them, or planting a seedling. I believe we can sabotage consumerism and still have a beautiful Santa tradition. We can be inspired by Santa Claus to celebrate the joy of life and become more rooted in the endless cycles of the universe around us. Maybe just being a little bit wild, like Odin. So tell me, is Santa a tradition that you want to recover? What kind of Santa do you like or want to adopt? And also, do you celebrate Christmas at all? Yule, Midsummer, Midwinter, or something else? Let me know down in the comments. And if you've enjoyed this video, please do click like. Maybe you can send this to a friend or a relative or an enemy to wish them a Merry Christmas. And don't forget to click the subscribe button and ring the bell for more folkloric analysis and stories. I'ma go destroy and devour my gingerbread house. See ya next Friday. A Merry Christmas and a happy climate change. I'm a mushroom now. Stars. Jesus Christ. I am sweating like a pig. Am I nighter?